Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Beast, the greatest novel ever written. And good news, you can own that greatest novel ever written as an audiobook, as a paperback, and the ebook is free. Yes, free. Free to download whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. Don't worry about me. Once you're hooked on Banneker Bones, you're going to have two sequels to purchase for cash money. So we'll be square by the end. Under the super secret pen name Robert Kent, I've written some books for older readers. For more information about them, more information about me, and more importantly, interviews with thousands of authors, literary agents, editors, all the world's best people, go to middlegradeninja.com. And that is more than enough intro. We got to get this thing started. My God, David Neilsen is here with us tonight. David, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I appreciate you making the time. The esteemed audience knows that I never summarize anybody else's biography or anybody else's. Why would I make you sit through that when you're right here and you could tell us? So why don't we begin? If you would just give esteemed audience kind of an overview of your background.
All right. Hello, esteemed audience. I am a middle grade author. Specifically, I work in spooky middle grade for the most part. I'm the author of, I got three books published. Dr. Fell and the Playground of Doom, Beyond the Doors, and then my latest one, while we're here talking, is Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors. I've been writing novels for about 10 years. Before that, I was writing screenplays in Hollywood. I got one TV show never was filmed, but it was optioned. And then I had one film that was made straight to a DVD, and I never tell anyone because it's horrible. And God forbid you actually stream it and watch it. You'll never get those hours back to your life. I'm currently living in Sleepy Hollow, New York. I'm a professional storyteller. So now that it's just past, October is over, I'm now sad, but I spent all of October terrifying small children with my stories and doing the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and things like that all over the county. Now that's all over, so now I go into hibernation and I don't come out again until early September, I hope. But other than that, that's me. I'm excited to be here and to share what I have with you guys.
How can you supplement the rush of horrifying small children in the off season? You're going to have to write another horror novel, I imagine.
I suppose I can give it a shot.
Well, I've got all kinds of questions for you. Why don't we start at the very beginning? A very good place to start. What's your first memory of wanting to be an author?
The first memory of wanting to be an author. I was 10 years old. I wrote my first book. It was like 20 pages. It was an adventure starring a very completely original character named Kentucky Jones. No relation, I'm sure. And my mom, back then in the days of the dinosaurs, we had to write, you were writing cursive and print. So my mom typed it up on a typewriter and then we made a little cover and we gave copies to, grandparents and whatnot. And that was my first actual book. I was 10, which puts it right about when Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. So I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. But that was the big thing, of course. So yeah, that was my first. I knew it was the excitement of having that book, even though it was typed by Mom and that she taped one of my third grade photos, in the back about the author, and we have a kind of a cardstock cover, but still holding something complete that was mine, and that was I knew I wanted to be a writer. I knew that was something I wanted to experience again.
I was in the third grade. I had a book we did for a class, and mine was The Twits 2. So I think Kentucky Jones, as far as originality goes, is already just head and shoulders above.
Yeah, I always liked Kentucky Jones. I don't know where he went. Bring him back someday in a parody.
Oh yeah, I think that's a story that's ripe to be told. You add some Lovecraftian monsters in there, my friend. That story writes itself.
Yeah.
So, and were you a big reader as a child as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I read all the time. Sometimes I would be reading while walking, even up through college. I was known to be always having a book with me. And back then, of course, in at the age 10, 11, 12, we there was no such thing as middle grade. That genre didn't exist. So I read adult science fiction and fantasy mostly. I read Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, David Eddings, even tried my hand at Tolkien, but that was a bit much for me at that age. Piers Anthony, the Xanth books, things like that are what I gobbled up at that age.
Piers Anthony is just the perfect book, I think, for a young impressionable adolescent. At least it was for me.
No, the Xanth Chronicles absolutely were fantastic. And I read some of his other Bio, the Space Tyrant was always a good one. And he had a couple others. I think he did do Tarot with those his. But the Xanth books are the classic Piers Anthony, and they are the glorious introduction into fantasy. I think they're really a good, is what they were. They're very, very formulaic. They have various things that always happen. And it was the beginning of middle grade. It wasn't called middle grade because they didn't exist. It was called adult fantasy, but I think really the Xanth books are middle grade.
The nice thing about formulaic books at that age is you don't know the formula yet, so it's all new to you.
Right.
And Piers Anthony must have invented this. That genius.
That was actually with that being like the Xanth books were such a big part of me as a kid, that Piers Anthony the name. I also loved his the fates, the various On a Pale Horse and the Death Time Fate, all these books. He has a book about those series. But years later, I wrote a short story. It was in a magazine, and then the magazine later on decided they wanted to release an anthology of their best of, and they put my story in there, as well as a story from Piers Anthony. So I was like, I'm finally in a collection with Piers Anthony. It's like, that's so awesome. But yeah, things go.
Wow, that is tremendous. That's a badge of honor. I assume you have that book someplace on a shelf.
Oh yeah, I've got it, absolutely.
And reading and walking, how's that work?
It's tricky. I would, kind of looking up and down as I go. Like I could see it, I'd read a sentence or two, and my head would keep reading that sentence as I look at it, like I could see it. And I would usually do it in places that I knew where I was, so I didn't necessarily have to look as much because I kind of knew the route. But I just loved reading. If I'm in a good story, I don't want to stop. So I would have, these books that I'd have them in class under my other books I'm supposed to be studying in class. And I have the book I'm reading down here and be like, oh yes, sir. No, this is the answer. It's Georgia. Okay, moving on. Whatever you can get. So yeah, anytime I got a chance to read, it's something that I wanted to do, and still try to read as much as I can.
And have you ever tried writing and walking?
No. Because I'm afraid I would fall and the pencil would go through my eye and blood everywhere. Just nasty stuff.
Yeah, no, that could only end in disaster. It's probably for the best.
Yeah, I think so.
Although I've talked to writers who do this, I haven't been able to do this myself, but who take walks and will dictate books directly into their phone or a tape recorder or whatever.
If I had the technological know-how to do that, I probably could, because I certainly think ideas. I come across the ideas, I think about them, but I think I can't figure out how to use my phone properly. I'm not that generation. I'm a little too old for that. I got the internet down, but then those pesky phones came up, and that's the next thing. And then soon it'll just be a chip in your body. But or the Google glasses. Wherever happened to the Google glasses? They're going to bring those back. And that's how we'll be able to see everything on your. But right now I can't. I just haven't, not into it. And even when I can, like I've got a couple of recording pieces on it, then it's such a pain to have to listen it back and type it in and so forth. So I just not on that.
Yeah, I had this silly idea in my head. It's probably misguided, as so many of my writing thoughts are. But I have this thought that if I have an idea while I'm out on my walk or whatever, if it's a good idea, it will still be there.
It will still be there. Yes.
It's one of those bad ones that'll go back to the ether roll and make room for hopefully the ether, and hopefully make room for a better idea.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that isn't always the case. I've lost plenty of ideas that I knew were absolutely brilliant because I didn't write them down. Or hello, Kitty Tail. Or
Mabel making her usual guest appearance on the show. Esteemed
yeah,
audience, you.
my cats. I have two cats, but they will not allow themselves to be held by me. So we're not going to be able to see them. They're not going to be up here walking around. But I do love the cats. But I don't know what I was talking about now. The cat
about
threw
technology and
technology.
fighting ideas and losing
Yes.
ideas.
Yes, and we've talked about nope. I don't, there's no brain up here. It's just a big empty hole with air going in there. Because I see cat, and it's like, I'm like in Up, that dog, but squirrel. I'm more like, let me tell you about the hypothesis about what man's real purpose in cat. Just gone.
Well, I've read 2 guest posts by you available now at middlegradeninja.com, which I'll continue to plug throughout the program because I love those guest posts and I think everyone should read them, and I'll put them in the show notes. I've just read your most recent novel, so there's a brain in there for sure. Can be
Thank you. Then I feel happy. I'm not. And someday I'll have the hat surgically removed, but right now it's just stuck there. I just take your word for it that it's not an empty hole at the top.
Those of you listening, David is wearing a purple top hat. Is that a fair description?
Yes, it's a purple top hat. Purple that took me a long time to find. For the videos, you can see those on video. I'm showing at the cover of my book, Dr. Fell in the Playground of Doom, and you see the character has a purple top hat. And I mentioned that, I described that in the book. So when the guy put it on there, that was absolutely correct. But I had to have the same hat as Dr. Fell. And I looked online and Amazon, all the purple top hats were like really nasty, flimsy, the stuff that you'd wear for a day, but like they're made out of paper, that none of them were good. So my family and I were vacationing in London, and on Portobello Road, all these markets, we're just walking past, and my wife's like, David, there's your hat. And so, I have to buy the hat. And so I'm fly back to America with holding my purple top hat in my lap because I'm not going to shove it in something, whatever. But yes, I now bring it to all my events because it's my purple top hat, and I like it. They make me happy.
Now that you've got not Dr. Fell's hat, it's your hat, but kind of Dr. Fell's hat. Yeah. Was that intended? You wear that, I'm assuming, to promote the books? Do you wear that when you write?
I wear it when I'm promoting my books. It gets the connection. Obviously, people see the cover, and they'll say, "Oh, that's so and so." I'll often get is, "Oh, you're Willy Wonka," because I completely forgot that Gene Wilder wears a purple top hat throughout Willy Wonka. I completely forgot about that. So no, I'm not Willy Wonka. I'm Dr. Fell. And it's also just become something that I've been known by. People. Oh, it's the guy with the purple top hat. Okay, good. We know him. I've had people like, I was at a festival, it was a street fair, and someone who knew me but was far away from me, another like a random person was asking some questions that she knew I would be able to answer. She's like, "Oh, go find the one with the purple top hat. He can answer this for you." It's like, okay, we'll go find David, and there I am.
Well, I want to talk about Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors, available now, esteemed audience. You could be purchasing it on your phone or whatever device you're listening to us on. I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about your transition from traditionally published author now to, I think, hybrid author. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, hybrid is probably good. Still working on it. So my first 2 books were traditionally published through Crown Books for Young Readers. And I still have an agent that's been pushing other books around. We have a book we're pushing right now, trying to get things going. But meanwhile, Lillian Lovecraft was a story that's very near and dear to my heart, that lots of people, publishers would read and they'd say, "We really like the writing. We just have no idea what to do with this. So we're going to pass." Like, everyone liked it, but no one would know how to market it. So I finally said, you know what, I want this to show life. So I decided that I'm going to put it out there myself, because it's such a wonderful story. Includes some of the characters that I beloved more than anything. Show you the cover. You can see the cover here. This is Frank, and he's the star as far as I'm concerned. Lillian's the star, of course, but Frank is the steals the show for me. And so I wanted to get him. In fact, my mother's building is creating a plush Frank for me, so I'll have a stuffed animal of Frank when I can go to places. I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be very exciting. But yeah, so I decided to go the independent route, self-publishing route for this one, and to see how it works. I know people, you hear people that they make $100,000 or more a year, they make all this money, independent publishing. I have a friend, I do know somebody who makes a very good living self-publishing. Now, they self-publish erotica, which is not what I do, but it's all them, and they make plenty of money. And so they've got lots of books. That's the key, is to have a large number of books. But I want to see if I can make that work on my end while we're still trying to push some stories out. Traditionally, I have a large backlog of stories that I want to get out that I'm going to try to do independently and see how that works.
I want to tease that for now, because I want to kind of continue on your author's journey and get the whole David Neilsen experience. So what's the foray into film? When do you go from I want to be an author when I grow up to I want to be a filmmaker, or is it all kind of one?
Well, to be honest, I want to be an author. I want to be an actor as well. I ended up in Hollywood to be an actor because that's why I actually have a degree in theater. And that's what I've always loved. But I was always the one who was writing the stuff that we were doing, or adapting the plays or whatever. I was always doing the writing. And I would write stories and this and that. And I never thought, it's like you wanted to be an author, but like authors are these special people who obviously I could never be one of them, because they are so amazing people that they probably live on an island all by themselves. There's just a little author island, and they're brought in there and they're fed tea leaves. I don't know. So I never thought about it. And then I took a class in screenwriting, and that's great. And I'm in Hollywood, so I started doing that, and I caught on. Caught on to an extent. I got a manager. We optioned a TV show. We had stuff going on, but nothing ever actually came of it. It's my career was stuck in development hell, they say. That's what it's called. It just nothing ever happened. And then eventually, after a good number of years doing that, and we moved out of Los Angeles to where we are now in New York. And that was a good break for me. I still tried a little, screenplays, but then occurred to me, very important thing occurred to me, a lot more books get published each year than movies made. So I probably had a better shot at getting a book made than a movie. But the first thing was, can I write prose? Because writing a screenplay is great. It's all dialogue. It's talk, 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 with very little description. Well, that isn't a good book unless you're Dan Brown. So I had to try to put in could I write actual prose? So I started with short stories. And after a while, I figured I could do this. And I could be just selling a lot of the short stories that almost everyone I wrote would be bought by somebody. And then it was like, okay, let's try books. I'm ready now. I've decided that I can do, let's get the larger story. And so naturally, the first thing I did was adapted one of my screenplays. Didn't go anywhere, but it was something I knew the story. The story is done. So now I don't have to, it's outlined, it's written. But that didn't work out as well as I liked. But then I got the books that got me the agents, and then we sold Dr. Fell, and it was all history from there.
I imagine if you're starting with something where you've already written a screenplay and it's your first attempt at an actual prose novel, if nothing else, that's got to make just practicing your first time out with prose a lot easier, already having the story, already having the dialogue.
Yeah, it was. I had the dialogue, although interestingly enough, what I discovered as I'm writing it is that when I write the scene, like there's a scene in a movie, right? There's a scene, and then I translate that to a scene in a book with the same dialogue. In the book, it's a really thin, short scene, and much more, I just feel like it's just a wimpy scene, and it needs more. So I have to expand it and create it and give it more shelter and give it some shading color and whatnot. But you don't have time in a movie to do all that, because then your scenes would be so long. Your movie would be 6 hours, and it's ridiculous. So in movies, it's about cutting it down to like, can you do this? You do the scene with 10 lines. That's great. Now do it with 9. Now, you know what? Make it 8 lines, because that'll get it. Try 5, and get the information out as quickly as possible so we can move to the next scene. And 5 lines may give a full, because of the movie, may give it a full idea, give a full scene, but 5 lines of dialogue isn't enough in a book to really give it more than half a page or more. So it was a good, my own screenplays are a good starting point, and I have a couple more that I'm considering adapting, always have for a while, but they're just a starting point. But it is nice to have the whole arc of the story is complete. I know what happens in the story. I know how it's going to end. I know who the characters are and what they're doing and their secrets and so forth. And that doesn't have to be created. It's just, describing it. That's what has to be done.
And so how many screenplays did you have under your belt by the time you're thinking about switching over to novels?
Like 8 or 9, maybe. Yeah, something around there. And only one never got made. No, no more. No, one got made, but now more like 11 or 12 when I think about it, because I forgot about that whole section. So probably about 10, 11, 12 screenplays were done, and then one was made, and it was horrible. I learned it was made low budget, and the first thing, like, it was an action adventure, and at one point there's this massive. The end was the hero and the villain have this fight, and they go into a river, and they're fighting a river, and they go over a waterfall, and they're fighting. So it's exciting stuff. So it comes time to film it, and it's just the two of them having a fist fight in a small stream, because that's what they can afford. They're not going to send anyone over the waterfall. They're going to punch it out in the stream. And so you get the center idea. They got at one point they realized they could blow up one small thing, and they're like, that's going to be the centerpiece. And like in the script, it was like a tiny afterword, but now okay, that's going to be the big thing, because they have the budget to blow this up. So we're going to blow this up, and oh boy, that becomes the big thing. And it wasn't the script. So I learned a lot about making low budget movies. And the first time I met with the lead, who was this big burly guy, a cage fighter, a Dutch cage fighter. And I'd written the beginning to give his character a backstory. I wanted to know where this character came from and what drives him and motivates him. So I had some talk about that and whatnot. First thing, he sits down. I'm sitting with him and the director and myself, and he's like, "Okay, first, I don't say all these words." He starts crossing out whole paragraphs. Too many words. Okay, I can see where this is going. That's Hollywood for you.
It's time for a voiceover. You just get Michael Caine or Morgan Freeman or somebody to narrate, and that's
right.
You're covered. So when you're dealing with with a small production like that, if they're tearing your screenplay apart anyway, and they don't have the money to necessarily film the scenes that you had originally envisioned, can you at least come back to them and say, "Hey, I'm an actor. Can you get me a couple of lines in this thing?" Or... Yeah,
and they offered me a part, but they were filming this section. It was filmed right when my daughter was born, and they were filming some of it in Trinidad, and they offered me a small part that would be in Trinidad, but I couldn't get away for a few days. I mean, my daughter was literally like 3 weeks old, and so I stayed with her. But I got to visit the set, because they did part of it in Trinidad, and they filmed part of it in Los Angeles. And so when they were on the part in Los Angeles, I got to visit one day, and it was kind of fun. Actually, I do have somebody was in it who is now somebody, which is Michael Ritter, who plays Yondu. Or is that his name? The blue guy in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Michael Rooker?
Rooker, that's it. Rooker. Michael Rooker. So Michael Rooker is the big villain in my movie.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it was cool. This was a long time before Guardians of the Galaxy. His big thing at that time had been either Sixth Day with Schwarzenegger or Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone. Those were his big things at the time.
He's been around forever. I love
He has.
back in Portrait of Portrait of a Serial
Right?
Killer.
Yeah. Yeah. Another good one.
It turns out I'm kind of a Michael Rooker fan. I'm just realizing this. I've been watching that guy a long time. Oh,
There
yeah.
you go. Well, then you'll pick up. You'll have to find my film. It's called The Eliminator. You can get it on. You can find it on YouTube, and it's a bring a six pack.
Sure. Well, seeing as how this is the first time we finally revealed the name of this film, I'm getting the sense that spending the time with your newborn daughter was absolutely the right decision.
Yes, it was. It was, and it wasn't even my title. I had a different title entirely. And that, that's the same thing in books too. Both of my books that were traditionally published ended up with different titles than what I ended up. Similar, close, but they had to make it different for them. In one of them, I think they did better, and one is just as well either way. They did improve one of them.
So what's your original training to be a screenwriter? Was it just working with actors, or did you go to school someplace to learn how
No, I mean, my school is all theater. When I was in college studying theater, I did take a screenwriting course. That was a lot of fun. And even then I wrote a play because I was going to be writing plays. I'm in theater now. Yaha! And so I wrote a play, and we actually got to perform it. And everyone loved the first half, and the second half, when things got serious and whatnot, and they're like, nah, it didn't work so well. I was much more a comic. I've been a comic most of my career in terms of writing, and then for some reason I turned to horror. My mother still has no idea why that happened, but so now I mix both. Now my horror is very funny. At least I try to think so. I like to think so. My middle grade horror can't be over the top horrific because 8 and 9-year-olds are reading this, so it has a lot of humor and needs to be infused in it, and that's where it kind of hits my sweet spot of combining the two. As for study, other than that class, no, it's just a lifetime of writing. I've always been a writer, essays or whatever. I was always writing stories, always enjoying writing things. So, and the writing is a muscle. The more you practice it, the better you get. So the fact that I was always writing stuff just makes my writing better and better and better. Just like if you're playing basketball, the more you shoot a free throw, you'll get better at it. You're playing the violin, you'll get better the more you practice. Writing is the same thing. You need to practice.
So you come back to New York and you were writing adult horror for a bit. When do you decide to make that transition to middle grade? What inspires that?
A picture. I'm writing adult horror, and then I start doing the short stories, and they're all adult horror. Most of my short stories are adult horror. But when it came time for a book, I was utterly inspired by a single picture, illustration drawn by the late Trina Shart Hyman, who was a children's illustrator in the 70s and 80s. And she was part of this project where I don't know who asked a whole bunch of illustrators to draw one picture of their favorite fairy tale or fable. It was all for charity. So lots of different people in it. The only one I can ever remember is Chris Alsberg, the guy who did Jumanji. He did one also, but she did one. And while you saw, like, there was a Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, there was Little Miss Muffet, and there was a Peter Pumpkin Eater, and there was a bunch of other stuff. And then Trina Shart Hyman did something called Dr. Fell, and she had this picture of this guy who's this old guy in a top hat. It's black and white, it's all pencil, and he's kind of pointing down at a little girl. He's like, "Hey, come here, little girl," and the girl's looking up at her like, "I don't like you." And on his back, we can see, because they're in profile, but the girl can't see, he's got a basket, and out of the baskets are children's body parts. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I looked up, so I had to know what is this? What is this? And I asked my mother-in-law, who was expert in children's literature for 50 years at Boston Public Schools. So if anyone knows anything about fable or fairy tale, it'll be her. So I say, what is this? And she says, I don't know. So we looked it up. We Googled it. And turns out the Dr. Fell was created from a poem in 1680 by a guy named Tom Brown. He wrote a 4-line poem. I do not like thee, Dr. Fell. The reason why I cannot tell. But this I know, and know it well. I do not like thee, Dr. Fell. That's it. And Trina Schartheimer took those 4 lines and created this picture. And that picture, it spoke to me. I knew I had a whole story in there. And because it centered on an old man talking to a little girl, I knew the girl was the hero, or in this case, there's 3 kids, 2 of them are girls, or the hero is at this age level. And I started writing with that in mind, that this is for kids, because Dr. Fell is a fable, it's a fairy tale. And it just came out really well. And I mean, it got published, so it came out pretty well. But from that one picture kind of set me on the path. And with that success, and it was so much easier. It was easy for me. Like my adult horror, they're all short stories. I can't extend them. They're just very short little pieces. But this had a whole life in it. I could extend it out. So that's what I ended up doing with the with the books. That's why the books are middle grade and the short stories are adult.
So is it you get inspired, you have this frenzied period of about a month where you write the whole book down and then you send it to an agent and the agent says, yes, let's do this? Or is there a little bit more of a
So took me 4 months to write Dr. Fell. And I was writing other things in between. I used to go and write like one day, write on one project and another project, and just keep going back and forth between 2 or 3 projects until one of them hooked me and I suddenly fell in love. And that was very quickly Dr. Fell. So the others get put aside and I've got to finish this one, go on the path. And so it took me about 4 months to get that done. And I already had an agent at that time because of a book I'd written before then that had gotten his interest but hadn't been sold. And so when I showed him Dr. Fell, he's like, oh, I can sell this. Oh, don't worry. This I can sell. And he was right. Eventually, there were a couple of different companies that wanted it, and they didn't get to have a bidding war because they were with the same parent company. So they just had like a nice conversation. You take it. No, you take it. No, you take it. And then I got my book deal. It was a 2-book deal. So that's the second book, Beyond the Doors, came out of that. But it's not a sequel or anything. It's a completely separate story.
And this is the literary agent Eric, who's thanked in the back of the newest book, or
yep, it's Eric Myers, an excellent agent. Although he does more adult now, he doesn't do as many kids. Was one of his few last kids authors. He had for a long time Chris Grabenstein, and when Chris Grabenstein left, I think that was a lot of his desire to do children's stuff left with that.
Well, that makes sense. But now, does it make sense? I don't know that it does. Sometimes I just say things and I listen to myself. But why?
Who knows?
So, okay. So Dr. Fell, that's a pretty easy, relatively easy, considering the other books as far as getting that sold. And then the next book, what's that look like? Between the Doors, is that 4 months of
Beyond the Doors? That took longer. So that was the first time that I'd written something like with a deadline, because they're like, great, it's a 2-book deal. They wanted me to pitch them ideas for a second book, and they specifically said they didn't want a sequel to Dr. Fell. So I had some ideas. I had a couple of different books that I was like that each had written 30, 40 pages, and I summarized those. And then I had an idea for a sequel, so I added it just in case they changed their mind. And then I sent these 4 ideas to my agent to send on, and he came back and said, no, give me a 5th. 5's a better number than 4. So I didn't have a 5th project, but I had a picture in my mind that I'd played with for years. And so I described this picture, and of course that's the one that they chose. The picture ended up being very much like the cover, although this is much better drawing than mine. Mine would be stick figures, but that's when it came time for the, what do you want? What do you think the cover should look like? I said, well, the picture that made the whole thing happen. But so when they said they want that book, and here's your deadline, you got to do it by this, and this time, and I had no idea what the story was. I just had a picture. I didn't know what was going on, so I had to do a lot of questioning and figure things out about in trial and error what's going on in this book. Why is it a story? Why is it interesting? So it took 6 months, and I came out with a very, very, very pleased. I think it came out really well. Very intricate, far more intricate and detailed than Dr. Fell. Dr. Fell, I say, is like a good for like is everyone loves Dr. Fell, and that's when if I'm meeting people in the street and they're asking, or I'm at a fair or a book fair, if their kids are like 8 or 9, I'll push them to Dr. Fell. If they're like 11 and 12, I'll say you can try Beyond the Doors. It's a little more complicated. You got to follow things a little more, and it's also about 100 pages longer.
And then, so when do you start working on Lillian Lovecraft?
Lillian was actually the next one I wrote after Beyond the Doors. And I was excited, thinking it would be the third one that would be published, that the 2-book deal, and they'd come back and do the third one. But they decided they didn't want to do more with me. And then when they looked at Lillian, it just wasn't, again, they're like, it's a nice read, but I can't do anything with it. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to market it. And so we pitched it to a bunch of different people, and we got pretty much that response everywhere, which is, this is a great book, but I wouldn't know how to market it. Because with traditional publishing, that's the thing. Where can we say what comps? It has no comps. I mean, sometimes I say maybe, I get a lot of maybe Lemony Snicket. My writing can be in that genre, perhaps. Especially Dr. Fell falls in that realm. But really, there isn't many comps for Lillian Lovecraft. That style of humor mixed with Lovecraftian nastiness just isn't done. And for kids, is not done very much. For some reason, I can't figure out why. Because I think it's brilliant, but that's me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the book. So, as promised, I won't make you sit through me summarizing your book. What does esteemed audience need to know about Lillian Lovecraft so they can be purchasing their copy while they're listening to us?
Okay. Well, Lillian Lovecraft is brilliant, great book. You should buy it. No, well, yes, but Lillian Lovecraft is about 14 years old, and she accidentally becomes haunted by a horrific entity from beyond time and space whose name is Frank. And Frank likes to eat mustard, play with people's toupees. He's like a little kid. He's not really evil as he is obnoxious, and he's not so much haunting her as he is making her babysitting. But Frank's arrival is the harbinger of the arrival of far worse things that are going to start coming. And then there's a demented madman. I guess that means the same thing, but a demented individual who is trying to open a portal into Frank's realm. And if he succeeds in doing that, then a gigantic eyeball will come and probably devour all of mankind. It is only up to Lillian and her friends, and then Frank, if he feels like it, to join forces and stop the madman and save the world and have some mustard for breakfast. There's a lot of humor in it. But I mean, the name Lillian Lovecraft was an homage, definitely, to the Lovecraftian way. The horrors, Frank has 7 eyes on tentacles, 3 mouths, and 5 arm tentacles, 7 eye stalks, and 3 mouths. And he's gelatinous and pink. He can squeeze himself into anything. He's just and they come across all kinds of just mind-blowing horrors, things that I can't even, bizarre creations that haunt. I would dip into my mind for the most crazy things I can come up with. A creature that does this and looks like this, a giant tongue, whatever. And then the people that they drive insane or so forth. So the thing is that Lillian's the only one that can see Frank, which is fun. So but they see her talking to him. So her friends know that Frank exists, but they just see one side of the conversation whenever she's talking to them. Because they can't see him, but she can. They can't hear him, but she can, et cetera, et cetera.
So who are you thinking would be the ideal reader for the story?
The ideal reader is someone probably a child, 10, 11, 12, 13 or so, who likes, who wants to have some fun, who doesn't take himself or herself too seriously, enjoys a good fantasy, enjoys a good story. That this ended up being a big story of friendship, and there is like a positive bonding between Lillian and Frank that really becomes the center of the story, is this friendship. And you know, how do you become friends with something that is so different from you and yet so you know, so similar but so different, and you know, completely different species, different habits, different whatevers, and this becomes the tentpole of what brings the story to life. I think, you know, if you like, talk about some fantastical stuff, you talk about the Lemony Snicket we mentioned, trying to think of some other series, maybe some Discworld, Terry Pratchett, a little bit perhaps, and also adults who like that stuff, the Myth Inc. books, the Discworld books, the stuff like that, which is a lot of humor in their science fiction and fantasy. Science fiction fantasy that doesn't necessarily take itself too seriously, but is open to having a lot of fun. And that's what Lillian Lovecraft is. At the end of the day, it's a lot of fun. You just find yourself laughing and enjoying it, and you know, shivering a little bit at some of the horrific things, but never too much.
Well, you had written a lovely guest post, which is available right now at middlegradeninja.com, esteemed audience. Go and check it out as soon as you're done listening to this interview, or while you're doing it. It's your life. You do it as you see fit. But you talked about the horrors of writing middle grade horror, why books that aim at children can't be awash in blood. And you had 4 tips there for 4 steps to kind of step back and make sure that your horror is going to be appropriate for a younger audience. So what tips can you offer, esteemed audience, about making sure that you haven't gone too far? And when do you know that you've gone too far? And if so, has it happened that you had to pull yourself back?
Not so much. Interestingly enough, there was in Dr. Fell, when I was doing that, there was one bit that I knew they're going to say, I don't get it. They think that's not going to fly. And they did. And I was like, I really want to keep that. You know, I know it's not quite kosher here. It's not quite whatever it's supposed to be, but I won the argument. It's still in there, and I was very proud of that. It's this bizarre feeling of what pain is, and it's how it can be a physical element that is pain and death. You know, and it's dark. It gets very dark. Dr. Fell gets very dark at the end. But it's still a, you know, very vibrant, fun, has an uplifting ending and so forth, sort of. So I've never, other than that, never really had anything to take back. I think you've gone too far, esteemed audience, if the children start crying. That's a good step, good sign that maybe you've gone too far. If a book is thrown across the room in disgust or fear, probably you went too far. Yeah, I don't do a lot of blood in my books. That's one thing I definitely do. You know, I don't do a lot of dying. Kids, when a character dies in a middle grade book, it has to be important, because death is a very important thing at that age. You can't just willy-nilly, oh, and this guy dies, moving on. No, every death has a meaning, has a purpose, is important. Good guys or bad guys or innocent bystanders or whatever. So, you know, and I don't use them very often. I don't think, you know, I don't have a whole lot of people dying in my books. I honestly don't remember the guest post. I don't remember what I wrote. I'm going back. I had 4 ideas. I bet they were good. Now,
Sir, that was written, let's see here, that was August 8th of 2016. You're telling me here that in 2021 you've had other thoughts since then? I am
5 years is, yeah, in 5 years I haven't figured it out. No, but writing horror for middle grade has always been a balance. There has to be some humor in it for the most part. But at the same time, I know some people who write stuff that doesn't have humor in it, and it's just good, spooky. You're looking for spooky or creepy more than horrific and god awful, mind-numbingly evil. Uh, you want that chill down the spine that it gets. And some of my books have elements of that in there. They'll bits in there that will make you go, you know. But at no point, hopefully, are you be like, that's just not going to happen because you've got to tone it down to a bit. But kids need to be stretched. They want to be stretched. So, I'm not. You never talk down to kids. I don't write down to kids. I assume they're going to come up to the level that I'm at. And sometimes I get in trouble for that. Sometimes my stuff is too old, they think. Lillian Lovecraft is specifically, I pushed her. She is 14, which is, in middle grade, every hero is 12 in middle grade. They're all 12 or about to be 12. Because with middle grade, you don't have to worry about romance. There's no romance in middle grade. The romance is saved for YA, but characters in YA are 17, 18, 19. Where are the books of the characters who happen to be 14 or 15? They don't exist. So Lillian's 14. She's a freshman in high school and just starting. So there's elements, very minor elements. She's aware of certain things, and her relationships are going to be different than the relationships of 12-year-old would be, or in some of my books, 8-year-olds have very different, who they are. That's one thing about Beyond the Doors is it's written with 4 different characters' point of view, chapter by chapter. I kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got like 12, 11, 9, and 7. So each time it's a different voice, and it's a different how they're going to see things in a different way. The younger sees things certain ways than the older ones. So that's where that comes from. I think I answered the question.
Self-censoring and kind of having some basic guidelines that you stick to. Yes. With let's have some humor. Let's avoid blood. Do you use some sort of a beta reader? How do you? I mean, you say we don't want them to cry, or we don't.
I do. I have lots. I have a volley of readers. A couple adults, but mostly kids. My books are read by kids. They're going to be the audience. So I have my beta readers are generally kids, which means every few years I have to get new beta readers because they grow up. I wish they would stop doing that. Oh, they were such good readers, and now they're like, duh. But yeah, it was easier when my kids were that age because all their friends were that age. And now I got to find kids who were that age, and that's hard to do. And you got a guy with a purple top hat hanging around the elementary schools and middle schools, and people think things. So, and I get responses from them, and I've had generally they'll say they love it. It's they like it this, or they'll say they don't get this. Every now and then you'll get that one precocious 7th grader is like, you had a typo on this page and there was a typo over here, and I don't know why this character did this instead of that. And you're like, thank you for fixing the typos, but did you like the book? And I've had people think I had an 8-year-old read a book, one of my other books, that frankly she was like, this is too old for me. She knew that. Her mom knew that. It was really 11, 12-year-old, meant for that. And at 8, she was, even though she was an advanced reader, it was too old for her. So, something about having a severed foot throughout the beginning of it threw her off. So I get sense from my beta readers, from the kids, if this is going to work. And at this point also, I've done so many, I have an idea of what works. It's sort of I've done the trial and error. Now I got the formula to an extent. I know what's too much, what isn't enough, where to go. And I push it. I tend to push it a little older. So I think there is a place. I think a lot of kids always want to read older. Kids want to read about a main character who's a couple years older than them. And we get a lot of kids who read through middle school and stop reading in high school because when they're 13, they're not really ready to read Twilight. Or if they are, they don't care. They're not at that level of what the relationship, which is all Twilight is. But at the same time, they're done with Lemony Snicket, because those kids are so young. So my books are set, a lot of them, for those kids who don't have as much for them to read. When you get stuff like that, the brilliance of like Harry Potter. The first couple books are middle grade books. As the audience got older, the books got older. Books couldn't keep up with the audience, but still the same thing is the concept that by the time you get to the end, if they've read all the others and they're no 8-year-old is diving into Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. They're devouring Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and then moving their way up. It's almost an education. So, and the Rick Riordan's Lightning Thief series does the same thing. Percy Jackson series starts young and then builds older and older. So, but my books, I don't have that concept of starting young and then going older yet. I do have a couple of ideas, and I have one book that would work for that. But at this point, these are one-off books, so I don't have a chance to build my audience to the right age. So I'm ready for them to dive in and take this, and I hope they enjoy it. I think they will.
Do you not have plans to bring Lillian Lovecraft back for more?
I do. I have a sequel. I was actually writing it, and I got sidetracked with something else because I was getting stuck with one plot point, and I was like, let's move on to something else. Because sometimes it's you don't want to just bang your head against the wall for so long, try to get one thing. You just move on to something else, and then it'll fix itself in the back of your mind where you're subconscious. But yes, there will be. I would like Lillian Lovecraft to have a number of adventures. She and Frank have a lot of things they have to do to save the world. There's a much larger thing at play. So this book sets in motion what's going to happen in the next series, the next few books.
Of course, if the esteemed audience only listens to this show, oh my God, they're only hearing the most brilliant publishing professionals in the industry, and they might get the idea that that's representative of the entirety, and it probably is mostly. But I am frustrated by this idea of there not being comps, therefore this book won't work. Where's the, let's create the comp. Let's do this. Let's do something new.
Wish I knew.
What's been done, to get more of the same, right?
Yeah, no, more of the same is safe because more of the same sells. Something is successful, then it's another one just like it will be just as successful. And these days, a lot of traditional publishing houses are about not failing. And so they know if they take something that is just like something else that has been very successful, that even if they fail, they won't be blamed because, hey, it's just like this, which was very successful. We thought it would be just as successful. But if they fail with something that just has no comps and it's just, well, why did you take it was a bad judgment to take a chance on this, and obviously you shouldn't be here. They don't want to, they lose their job. They don't want to take a step into what something brand new might be. And it's just the way it is. So, but these days with independent publishing, we can put our own books out and we can take the risks for them, for ourselves. And so, with Lillian Lovecraft, I'm taking the risk. It doesn't have, as I said, it doesn't have comps really. It is its own creation. Not just the genre, but also talk about the age, talk about being the character being 14. I had one book that they're like, oh, we like this, we just don't know if it's YA or middle grade, so we're not going to publish it. I've heard that before, with characters too old to be published. So it's not great. I mean, you'd love to have more artistic, smaller presses might have a better shot at taking that leap, but the big presses will not take a leap. They are all about protecting assets and doing what they know works. So if James Patterson, his last book made whatever, we know that the next 16 books of his will make the same amount of money. That's a safe bet. We're just going to go with that,
It's all good and well for me to talk tough on a podcast because it's not my job on the line. I understand. Fair enough. So when do you start thinking that maybe Lillian Lovecraft is going to be better off independently published
Well, I considered it for a while, but hadn't really made any moves or doing anything. And then I belong to a group called Spooky Middle Grade. You can get us at spookymiddlegrade.com. Bunch of basically we are writers of Spooky Middle Grade. And one woman said she was thinking about going independent. She wanted to know if anyone else was like wanted to take the leap with her. And so I was like, you know what? Yes, I will take the leap with you. And then she ended up backing off, but I went forward with it. And this is only, it's only a year ago or so. I said, I want to make this happen. And I had the book that I want to do it with. Like, I'm not going to write something new. I've got a bunch of stuff that I want to publish at some point that, I want to create the genre. I want to create the Neilsen genre of the weird and the fun and the wacky and the mix with Lovecraftian horror humor for kids. And so I have a lot of books in that genre that I'm gonna, I'm gonna try to get them out there. So Lillian Lovecraft is the first of that kind, and it was an interesting experience. I'm still learning. I had a lot of fun getting the artist. I found her on Instagram. She lives in Poland. She was great. She did a fantastic job. I loved her cover. It was perfect for me. It was, I searched out someone who had that style. This is the style of animation that I wanted, this kind of feel. And I didn't want anything too anime, didn't want anything, and black and white. I wanted this sort of living feel to it. And I got it. Putting it together, the whole process of formatting it, all the individual pages, the getting everything settled right, and it was a learning experience. And for my next one, I will have learned many things, and I will learn more with the next one. They'll just get easier and easier as I go, I'm sure.
And obviously, since he's thanked in the back, I'm assuming Eric Myers, your agent, is fully on board with this and supporting you.
He actually is on board. I should be honest. We parted ways very recently, both sides very amicably. But he was very much behind what me going independent. He thought that was a really good idea. So hopefully the idea is to draw enough interest with my books and get them in there with the ones that I've done, that other publishers will see, oh, he's got these books and they sell, so we can take a little risk on him because we know he's sold these books, et cetera. So you're trying to build the two together, because you have a lot more control over independent, and you actually end up getting a lot more royalties independent, but there's no advance. So in fact, the advance is out of your pocket, which is different. So you take that plunge and then you have to build it back up. Whereas traditional, you get an advance and then you stay there for a long time until maybe you start making your advance back. You don't have to make an advance back when you self-publish. You just start getting royalties from the beginning, which is good.
And of course, you're also what's the word I'm looking for? You do one-man shows. You do. We'll talk in a bit about your murder mystery parties. I'm fascinated by this. But you're a classically trained actor, and you're out there. You're doing one-man shows. You're speaking to different groups. You're doing school visits already. So you've already got your foot in the door. Your network there. I'm assuming that's maybe been a little bit hampered by this whole massive worldwide pandemic thing.
Yeah, that little thing. Yeah, this was a good October. Last October was just dead. I had no events because no one was getting out and doing anything, and it was very depressing. I did a lot this time, and yeah, I'm selling my books at all my events. I sold tons and tons of books, which is great. And it's interesting. I look at my sales numbers on Amazon, and I realize I probably sold far more than that hand to hand at all my events throughout the month. Because I'm really good at when I can sell the story to you, when I can explain to you how great this is and give you the energy of what this is and how much fun these books are, people respond to that. Reading a description on Amazon sometimes doesn't get them the same feel as hearing it from the author himself or herself. So yeah, but doing the events, school events, anything I can get, books are always sold wherever I go if I can.
So now that you've got the total freedom, you've got the higher royalty, you've already got the network in place. You can get books out, I'm assuming, much faster if you desire.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody tells you no anymore. You have to tell you no, if that. So what would be the desire, or is there a desire to ever go back to traditional? And what would be a project that would be better suited for traditional than independent?
Well, something more mainstream would be more better for that. And I have a project that I'm now pitching out to agents, that we're pitching out to, hopefully, to editors, is much more mainstream. And the reason to go back, well, a couple of things. First of all, in advance is nice, and they have a market. If they get behind you, they can do a lot in marketing, and they can give you opportunities that you can't get on your own. There are festivals that won't take self-published books. Some big festivals I'd love to be a part of, but I can't, because my most recent stuff is independent, so they're not interested in me. And there's a cachet. Also, those books, independent books, aren't going to be in bookstores. You're going to get it on Amazon. That's pretty much it for now. Other traditional books will show up in Barnes and Noble and other bookstores around the country and so forth. I remember walking into a Barnes and Noble and seeing, at their time, both of my books, one or the other, and being excited. It was really, really exciting just to walk into a store and, oh, look, they've got Dr. Fell right there, And I would go into when I get bored, I go into bookstores. Then I found they had my book, and then I would stay there until I convinced someone to buy it. Yeah. I remember I did this whole book launch when Dr. Fell came out at Books of Wonder downtown, which I think it closed, but it was in Manhattan. And Chris Gravenstein came. He happened to live nearby. We had the same agent, and we'd met before. And so he came to support me. And he was the only person who came. So for 45 minutes, it was just me and Chris Gravenstein. And then one kid was wandering by, and the two of us berated the kid until he bought the book. We just forced him to buy the book. And later, a month later, I got an email hi, my son was the one who bought your book at Book of Wonder. I just want to tell you that he read it. He absolutely loved it. Thank you. It was great. And I felt good, because we really berated that kid. You're going to buy this book. Come on. He's right here. The author's right here. I got Chris Gravenstein doing that too. Come on, he's right there. It was fun. Had a great time.
I have a vague rumor. It's not confirmed, so I never want to promise this team. I don't promise anything until it's happened, and it's definitely going to come out, and I know the date it's going to come out. But Chris Gravenstein is likely to be a guest on the show in 2022. So I look forward to that.
Very cool.
Hopefully
he is the nicest.
Bring a bunch of kids into buying some books. It'll be great.
Yeah, he's the nicest man in the world. He really is. I owe a lot to Chris, and I think he's a great guy. I can't plug him enough. He's the nicest guy in the world. So you'll have a good time with him.
I will. Fingers crossed, because the moment I open my mouth and say something that's where it's not already recorded in the can, that'll be the one that falls through and doesn't happen for some reason. In the event of that, hey, good news, he already faced the 7 questions. You can read a written interview with him right now at middlegradeninja.com. And hopefully, Mr. Gravenstein, if you're listening, I can't wait to chat with you. You just heard me promise everybody listen. So
no pressure.
None whatsoever. And I know that you had narrated your first 2 audiobooks for Dr. Fell and for Beyond. I think I said between, or they're Beyond the Doors.
Right.
Do you have plans to do an audiobook for Lillian Lovecraft, and would you be the ideal narrator for that?
I'd have to be the narrator for that, because I do my books. I do all the voices. I know what those characters sound like, and I couldn't have Frank done by anyone but me. I've thought about, but again, this is independent, which means I'm doing it. Now, I have recorded books at home. I've done some voiceover work at home, so I have that technology. But it's a huge undertaking. and I can't guarantee enough of a payout at this point. I just can't guarantee that it would be worth all the time. And I have a regular day job, so the time it would take to do that and put it together and the formatting myself is not something that I'm necessarily looking forward to. Maybe down the road, I mean, I love doing voice work, so I would love to do a book for this. I loved doing the two books, the two audiobooks for Dr. Phil and Beyond the Doors. It felt so professional. I go downtown in Manhattan. I'm going up in the building. I'm in the booth, a very professional booth with everything there. And, I got outside guys that got like 6 banks of computers, and the director is doing all this. And it felt really cool. Like this, I'm really doing it. Yeah, this is so cool. And they came out well, I thought. But doing it on my own is not something I'm looking forward to. It's intimidating, very intimidating.
Well, you'd also have to measure the time you'd be spending on that against the time that you could be spending writing a sequel, writing another book, and all of that.
Right. That's correct. That's definitely correct.
And I'm watching our time, and I'm seeing that it's just slipped right by. That always seems to happen. But I can't not ask about these murder mystery parties.
Okay.
For groups of up to 50 guests. So how does that work? And is that still happening here post-pandemic?
I did a couple for the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery back in about a month ago. My murder mystery parties are very interactive. If you're coming, you are a character. You know who you're going to be ahead of time, so you can come in costume. You don't know much about your character. You know that you're Bob and you're a dentist. That's about all you might know. So you'll come dressed as a dentist or whatever you think that would be. And then once you're there, murder happens and you find out all stuff. Bob the dentist, but you're also a member of a cult, and you had an affair with this person, and you knew you hated the villain, the person who died. The corpse was your long lost ex sister or something, and you learn stuff about it, and you play this. Everyone is a suspect, so everyone who comes is a suspect, and the murderer doesn't know they're the murderer until they're there. So they know they're Bob the chef this time, and then they get their information. It says, oh, by the way, you're the killer. Oh, don't tell anybody. And so I have them act out all kinds of silly things to earn money, which they can use to buy clues. And so people start with clues, and they trade clues, and they try other things with clues, and they're doing all kinds of crazy things. I take pictures of people doing crazy things or whatever. So it's very interactive. It is not for anyone who wants to just sit in the back and watch. There's always 1 or 2 per event that just sits there and is like, this is not what I wanted to do. But everyone else has a great time. And I usually do them for about 20, 25 people. I did one for 50, so that's when I did one big one. But generally between 20 and 25 is the best level.
It sounds like just so much fun.
It's a lot of fun. And when it's a great night, usually you're serving wine, which helps people feel a little happier and able to do more of the silly things, and you're just having a good time. And oftentimes whoever the actual killer is doesn't matter. It's did you have fun that night? And you always did. Everyone does.
And depending on who your date is for the dinner party, if you're the killer, that's either a huge plus or a huge negative. It could go either way.
This could be true. This could be true. Very true.
So what esteemed audience knows I'm going to ask, because I make it my business to never not ask someone who comes on this show. David Neilsen, have you ever seen a flying saucer and or a ghost, and do you believe in them?
I have never seen a flying saucer. I don't know if I've seen a ghost or not. I've seen things that I can't explain. I've seen things that I run ghost tours here. That's one of the things I do in October is I run ghost tours of our 136-year-old music hall. And I've heard and seen things there that make me question. Do I think they exist? Yes. I think, I don't know if flying saucers exist. I guarantee that there's life on other planets. It's quite possible that we'll never be able to meet them because of the laws of physics. You know, there is no such thing as warp speed. There is no such thing as light speed. Maybe there are no things as wormholes. So maybe we're just, the distance is too vast to actually meet them. But I know they're out there. It'd be ridiculous if there weren't. As for ghosts, spiritual energy, you know, I don't think there's Casper the Friendly Ghost running around, but there is, I think, a residue left behind, perhaps at certain times, certain things. I think there's something going on. There's lots of the unexplained, and that's what I love. I don't want to know everything. I want to have mysteries in my life, and these guys, those are mysteries that I enjoy.
You're not seeing the ghost, but what kind of creepy stuff are you encountering on or around these tours?
Well, so there's one dressing room that has on this mystery tour, in this music hall, that has a history. Lights turn themselves on when no one's around. People feel an energy. And I was rehearsing, running through late at night before we opened the first ghost tour about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was in that room, and suddenly, like, the hairs on my hands also stood up, and my skin just went, and I just had to leave. I just felt this like pressure, like, get out of this room. And so I did. You know, I've been in there plenty of times since without feeling anything at all. And I've been in there plenty of times since late at night without feeling anything at all. But that one time, I definitely, I mean, maybe it's the placebo effect, if you want to call it that, but there was something happened that got me wanting to not be there, and raised the hairs on my hands and made me start shaking. So that was the biggest, most concrete thing that I felt. Beyond that, we had the Gotham Paranormal Research Society come to our music hall and spend 3 nights there recording everything, and they sent us recordings, and we have some interesting stuff, whistles and singing just barely that no one hears, and stuff like that could be ghosts doing, you know, preparing for their show late at night or whatever. So I'm listening to those, but personally it'd be that room.
I say you start to feel like you should get out.
Yeah, you know, if you know, it's nice when the ghosts give you that warning. By the way, you should go now. You listen to them. You know, yeah, go, run fast, run far.
Well, I probably hit record on my phone, set it down very slowly, then out.
They never show up on the phones. They're like, the phones don't have the right type of visual whatever to catch them, other than the blur, but then the blur can always be explained away.
Yeah, it seems like there's always some kind of party pooper explanation for every great little bit of evidence that comes out.
We had one thing that had us petrified. We had a door that was opening itself, and we kept like doing it, and we were convinced that we'd stirred something up, because we'd close this door, it would open itself. And we had like 4 or 5 of us individually seeing this happen, freaking out. You got to come see this. This is the weirdest thing. Okay. And we figured out what was happening, and it was nothing supernatural at all. One of those metal hooks was on it, and the metal was very shiny and kind of warped. So when it get in the door, it would slowly stretch out until it would pop open. So we'd close the door, walk away, be nothing, and 30 seconds later, the door would open itself. It was completely non-supernatural, but so that was a party pooper, but boy, it had our hearts pumping.
I wish that there was at least one person that never found out the solution and has gone through their life just thinking, oh my God, remember that haunted door? Well, I've got one final question for you, because I'm just saying that's what we've got time left for.
Sure.
Thank you, David Neilsen, for making the time and for being such an excellent guest with so many wonderful anecdotes to share with us. And I know you're going to be publishing, so hopefully we'll do this again sometime. But for tonight, my last question is always some variation of, if you could go back toward the start of your career, middle of your career, wherever it would have been useful to you, and give yourself some advice that might have made a difference in your career and might make a difference in the career of everybody that's watching or listening to us right now, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I would try to convince myself that marketing is just as important as writing. Even as traditionally published, that you're expected to market your own books. I wasn't hooked into the school visits, and I wasn't doing a lot of festivals and stuff when my first book came out, and so it didn't get out there as much. If it had come out a couple of years later, it would have had a lot more oomph. It would have had a lot more reach. So get involved early. Get a newsletter going. Get a website. Get your Twitter. Get on social media just a little bit, and go out to events and sell yourself at events and be there. So you now have a machine churning. So when the book comes out, it doesn't come out to nothing. It comes out to a machine that's already rolling and ready to start spreading the news, because you have to spread the news any way you can. Which is why you need to all buy Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors today.
There's that commercial voice. David, where can the esteemed audience find you online, follow you on social media, and all that good stuff?
My website is david-neilsen.com. That's DAVID-NEILSEN.com. I am on Facebook for now, which is at /David Neilsen author. I'm Mr. David Neilsen on Twitter and on Instagram. Those are the most. I think that's the end result of what I've got. Are those pieces right there? So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, website, and I've got a newsletter that I send out every couple of months.
What kind of wonderful pieces can esteemed audience look forward to when they've signed up for your newsletter?
Information about what some of my events, some book reviews. Sometimes I'll review other books I've read. Just other random things on top of my head. Information about my books, of course, and what's coming up. I did a cover reveal not that long ago, and so forth. So all kinds of goodies.
As always, esteemed audience, for more information about me, and more importantly, more information about the show, interviews, and 2 guest posts by tonight's guest, David Neilsen, head to middlegradeninja.com. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees that will change your life. And as always, God will let I'm alive. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.